Let us go. The year is 1949. And in the year 1949, Kahas prints the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek. This is not the first edition. This is the third edition. As you can see on the screen, it says Haisa Ashlishis. It was not part of the original print, but it was stamped on later. This is the third edition of the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek. What is the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek? The Tzemach Tzedek wrote a lot. He wrote Shuvas, he wrote a lot of Chassidus. He also wrote commentaries on many different Svarim. And, for example, Sefer HaChakira is notes that the Tzemach Tzedek composed as he was working through Mer Nevuchim, Chaves Halavavos, and these other Svarim. So he composed notes. And much of Sefer HaChakira is these notes. So too, as the Tzemach Tzedek was working through Halacha Svarim, whether it's Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, many of the other Rishonim, so he composed notes on these Halacha Svarim. This is the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek. This particular edition was printed in Germany. You may see on the bottom, it says all the way at the bottom, printed in Germany. What's Pshat? Why is this printed? Why is this printed in Germany? So really, we have to take a step back. During World War II, there were Hasidim in Shanghai. And the Hasidim in Shanghai they were there, they had a community there. They wanted Svarim, they needed Svarim. So they started printing Svarim over there. Kahas had been established by that time in 1941 in New York. However, they were not in touch with Kahas, and they were doing their own thing, publishing these Svarim in Shanghai. After World War II was over, they got in touch with headquarters, and there was an understanding that they can't just go it alone anymore and be publishing Svarim on their own. It has to be under Kahas, because Kahas is in charge of all publishing that relates to Lubavitch. And so, it became that way. But at the same time, an understanding emerged that it would perhaps be cheaper for them to publish over there, and they have experience with publishing because they've been doing it for a few years. It'd be cheaper for them to print Svarim there rather than printing them in New York. This is the first outsourcing to China. It started way before Nixon went to China, when Lubavitch was in China in the 1940s. And so, you see in the Igris of the Rebbe, many letters of the Rebbe throughout the year of Tafshin Vav, 1946, directing them what to print and how to print, and the Svarim that the Rebbe wanted here printed were being printed over there. Sometime in Tafshin Zayin, the Rebbe travels to Europe to meet his mother in France. Coinciding with this time, the Chassidim leave Shanghai, so there's very few that are left. When the Rebbe is in Europe, he meets particular individuals there, and the Rebbe understands that really the same thing could happen now in Germany, the same idea. Have people who are going to be involved in publishing, let them do the publishing here in Germany, and also it's going to be cheaper for them to do it in Germany compared to doing it in New York. And so this is the background of this third edition of the Chuvas of the Tzemach Tzedek that was printed in 1940, not the Chuvas, the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek that was printed in 1949. And a few years later, we come to the year 1954, 5 years after the Sefer was printed, and there was a Rosh Yeshiva, a very prominent Rosh Yeshiva in New York by the name of Rav Yitzchak Hutner, the Rosh Yeshiva of Reb Chaim Berlin, and he had a relationship with the Rebbe going back to their days in Germany, in Berlin, and later here in America as well. Throughout the years, they had the Rebbe and the Rebbe Yitzchak Hutner had a connection. And Rebbe Yitzchak Hutner sees something in the Sefer that is horrifying to him, that is shocking to him. And in 1954, he writes a letter to the Rebbe. We don't have his letter that he writes to the Rebbe. We do have the answer that the Rebbe responded to him. It's printed in the Igris Kodesh. So now turn to your source sheets and let's look at source number 1. What does it say? B'mayna al-Mechtav, Chav Gimel Adar Aleph, Tavshin Yudal. B'mayna al-Mechtav, Mechav Aleph Adar Rishon. In response to your letter from the 21st of Adar, Shememaher Hinini La'anoi Salav Shaloi Ba'atar, I am expediting a response, and this is skipping the line. Why? Kidei limnoya hoitza aslaz, in order to prevent defamation. In other words, there is a big issue that Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner wrote to the Rebbe about, and the Rebbe sees it as important to respond immediately to set the record straight. What was the issue that was raised? Continue in the letter. You note about what it says in the Sefer Piskei Dinim, Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis, that was printed in Germany. But you see it being an alteration. That in the earlier editions, it said it in a different way. But in the new edition, you have the words ve'ena tshuva, and those words were not there in the earlier prints. What are the earlier prints? There were two previous prints of the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek. The first print of the Piskei Dinim of Tzemach Tzedek is in 1884. That is the year Taf Reish Mem Dalid in Vilna. The second volume was printed by the famous Ram family printers. And this is the image that you see on the left side, the title page of this edition. The second printing of the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek is, you can see on the right-hand side, was printed in Shanghai. As far as I can tell, this was not under the direction of the Rebbe in 1946. There is no year here, but it seems to me that it happened earlier. It was not part of it wasn't directed out of New York to be printed. And in these two editions over here, it says one thing. And in the edition printed in Germany in 1949, it says something else. And Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner says, what's going on over here? Why is there a change? Why is there a change? You went into the tshuva, the Tzemach Tzedek, and not the tshuva. You went into the passage of the Tzemach Tzedek and you altered the text. So the Rebbe says, I'm responding right away to set the record straight so that we avoid an issue of defamation. It is very possible that Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner is not the one who discovered this problem. It is possible that one of his friends from the Litvische world discovered this problem and wrote to him knowing that he had a kesher to the Rebbe, and so therefore this is not just an issue between Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner and the Rebbe. It could be this was a larger issue as well. I don't know. So what does the Rebbe respond? The first thing the Rebbe says in the letter is, in text 1, Hine bevada yadu lo, you're certainly aware. V'shama oid yoiser, and you definitely heard a lot. Yachas chasidim l'rabam ha'admor. The relationship between Chassidim and a Rebbe. And once you know that, then this whole discussion is a non-starter. Why? Then what emerges is that it is impossible that such a fundamental change would have been introduced by a chassid into the text that his Rebbe wrote. So what's going on over here? What is the text that the Tzemach Tzedek wrote? What was the allegation of change? What happened over here? And what is the Rebbe responding? What is the response to this allegation? So we begin with this week's Parsha, which is Parsha Shlach. The end of Parsha Shlach, we learn about the mitzvah of tzitzis. The pasuk says, "Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim v'asu lahem tzitzis al kanfei vigdeim." They should make, in English we translate this as fringes. We should make fringes on the corners of your begodim. Notice the language of the pasuk. It doesn't say, go and buy a garment of tzitzis. You have the garment already. All you need to do is add strings to your garment. That's not how we do it today. Similarly, we find in Dvarim, in Parshas Kisei, what does it say? Gedilim tasa lecha loch. Gedilim, we understand to be tzitzis. Al arba kanfais ksuscha, on the four corners of your garment, asher techasaba, that you use for clothing. In other words, you already have the garment. You already have it. And here, by the way, we learn about the specification that it needs to have four corners. In Vayomer, the third parsha of Shema, this week's parsha, we don't learn about the four-corner din. We get that in Kisei. But what's the common denominator between the two? You already have your garment as four corners. Now, Hashem is saying, please add strings to that garment. And when we look at Chazal, we find that Chazal use the same language. Look in the Gemara in Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amid Beis, where it says, Shiva menudin l'shamayim. There are 7 types of people who are excommunicated by the Eibishter. Eluhein. And these are the 7 people. And it gives a list relevant for our purposes. Mishein lo tefillin b'roshah, if you don't have tefillin on the head. Tefillin b'zroyai, if you don't have tefillin b'zroyai. If the person doesn't have tzitzis b'bigdoi, or mezuzah b'pischa. Right? So think about this. Yeah, just like you do, the door we already have. What do we need to do? we need to put up a mezuzah on our doors. So tzitzis is being used in the same way. The beged you already have. All you need to do is put the tzitzis on your beged. Why is that? Because everyone wore in the biblical period, and even in the times of the Tanoim, and even in the times perhaps of the Amoraim, they wore a garment that had 4 corners, and everyone wore that. That was not a chiddush. The chiddush of Torah was that to the garment that everyone had that was 4 corners, you should put on the tzitzis. We see this clearly in Derech Eretz Rabbah. Derech Eretz Rabbah is this concept, is part of this genre of Masechtas Ktanis. Masechtas Ktanis is there's a few areas that are written in the style of the Mishnah that were not written by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Some period after Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi they were written up, and I think generally they're regarded as brachas, as teachings that have the weight of Tanoim, but that didn't make it into the Mishnah. So what does it say in Derech Eretz Rabbah Perek Yud? Hanichnas l'merchetz ketzad yasa. How should a person get undressed when he goes to the bathhouse? So here you have to say there. Choyle tzasmin olav. First take off your shoes. Then mesalek es koivay. Then take off your hat. Then mesalek es talisoy. Take off your talis. Right? Because that's the most external thing, other than the shoes and the hat. That's the most external thing. Then umatir es chaguray. You open the belt. Upoishet es chalukay. Then you take off your shirt. V'achar kach matir es purkosay hatachtoina. Then you take off what's equivalent to the undershirt. So in other words, everyone had what we call a talis. Everyone wore a talis. That's something that people wore all the time. The Chiddush in Torah, the Chiddush that happened at Har Sinai and subsequent to that was that you didn't need to take tzitzis and add them to this garment that they wore. When it came to the Purim class, I showed you this, I believe it was Purim. We discussed this image from the Dura Europos synagogue. This was a shul that was constructed, today it's in Syria, sometime in the 3rd century. It was built sometime in the 3rd century. So it's mamish, the first generation of the Amoraim. And this is the scene of Purim. For our purposes here, we're going to look at the individuals in the middle. They're wearing a Roman type of garment that is called a toga. That toga is the talis. This is the talis that the Tanoim spoke about, that the Amoraim spoke about. Also notice that the toga, the 4 corners of the toga are all on the left, right? You see how they're all on the left? And this has implications down to our day. Why in the morning do we take our talis and we wrap it around and we put, right? We swing over the right side to the left side? Because we're trying to do ituf. And ituf means that you need to have all 4 corners on the left, because that was the style of how a talis was worn in those days. And the understanding was that if you want to do a talis, you need to wear it like a talis. So wearing it like a talis means that you need to wear it in the proper way, which included having it over the head was one thing, but another thing was to have it all 4 corners on one side. Now we don't walk around all davening like that, but we do for Dalet Amos. Because if it's the amount of time for Dalet Amos that you did ituf, so now you did it the way it was originally done, and now you yoytza l'chol hadis. So the mitzvah of tzitzis was a very, very simple mitzvah to observe in those days. The garment you already had, you needed to add the strings. And then change happened. What was the change? People stopped wearing the garment. People stopped wearing this talis. It fell out of style. Where do we see? When did this happen exactly? I don't know. Obviously, in every time, every place, it happened at a different time. However, we're already able to see when we come to the Rishonim that they're dealing with a reality that this is not a garment that's stylish anymore. And that has major implications for the dinim of tzitzis. Where do we see this? In the Erzerua. The Erzerua is Rabbi Yitzchak of Vienna. His dates are around from 1180 to 1250. And he writes as follows in Ilchas Avhilus. When we bury the dead in a talis of 4 corners, it is implied in Perek HaTcheles, in the Gemara, that you need to put tzitzis on this talis. In Cain, so if that's the implication in the Gemara, why we today, living in the 13th century, do we take off the tzitzis when we bury people in their talis? This is the question. It goes, Hepech Gemara. So Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam, so already Rabbeinu Tam addressed this issue. And what did Rabbeinu Tam say? To be Meyem, Hoya, Lekulam, Bechayem, Talis, Bas, Arbas, Knofayim. In their days, in the days of the Tanoim and Amoraim, everyone used to always wear a talis that had 4 corners. Aval Achshav today, Afilu B'chayav Ein Loi. When people are alive, they don't walk around with a talis. So therefore, it makes no sense to put strings on the talis. Why? Because that would be mocking the weak. If you start doing a mitzvah with him that he didn't do during his lifetime. What's Rabbeinu Tam saying here? He's saying an amazing thing. People stopped wearing a talis. And as a result, people aren't doing the mitzvah of tzitzis anymore. Why? Because people also knew the din, that there is no chiyuv to go and buy yourself a talis so that you have tzitzis. If you have a talis that has 4 corners, then you're obligated to put tzitzis on it. We're going to talk about it a little more. Wait a second. What we see right here is Rabbeinu Tam is saying there are people who have nothing. No, a talis is not something that they get to. They don't have it. Yeah, they're not doing it. And so therefore, we're going to come, the person passes away, we're going to put it on the talis. So almost like loyeg l'rosh, which is something that we're very careful in halacha about, so to speak, mocking the dead. And so therefore, Rabbeinu Tam said not to do. Let's not make a judgment yet about what people were or weren't doing yet until we finish the whole katan. Okay, so what if someone did do the mitzvah of talis during his life? Then he should have the schus to be buried with his tzitzis. Enfert, it's not clear. Is this Rabbeinu Tam talking? Is this the Erzarua talking? The answer is, loihi, no, we don't follow this. Why? It's not fair for the other person who's not. In other words, we don't want to start having differences in the Jewish community. We don't want to start having... Disturbing?
No, it's just the colors of
Don't worry about the colors. We don't want to start making differences between people, and so therefore, if some are being buried without a talis, all are being buried without a talis. Without tzitzis, all are being buried without tzitzis. V'im toimar, ask further. Adarabah, maybe v'nasa tzitzis la'oisam shakimu mitzvah tzitzis ki hechi dilizdal zaloi oisam shaloi kimu. Maybe this will be a good pressure tactic. Let's make an announcement in the shul that, by the way, if you want to be buried in tzitzis, you need to wear it during your lifetime. And then this is a way to start getting everyone to wear tzitzis. No, there's no reason for this. Why? In those days, when everyone wore a talis that had 4 corners, so there should be a punishment for someone who says, I'm not going to wear a talis bas arba knafayim, because I don't want to wear tzitzis, so it's stylish, everyone's wearing it. Yeah, but I so don't want to wear tzitzis that I'm not going to wear the stylish thing, I'll be not to have tzitzis. So there he brings from a Gemara that there's punishment. But in our reality, when it's not a stylish thing to wear this type of toga, to wear this type of thing, for us to even make this pressure tactic campaign to get people to start wearing tzitzis, it's not fair. We don't have the authority to do it, because at the end of the day, there isn't a chiyuv to go and to get this garment. It's not like tefillin. Tefillin is a chiyuv shebeguf you need to put on every day. Tzitzis doesn't have that. There isn't a chiyuv to do it, and so therefore, you can't do this campaign. Says, here for sure the Erzarua talking, Miu loy nehira li zatam. I don't like this reason. Why? The Bebeis HaKnesses in Shul, and also all day under his shirt, and a klam min hamatmin. It's not a shocking thing. In other words, the line that I didn't read is that Rabbeinu Tam said, but today, if you walk around with tzitzis, it's min hamatmin. It's like unusual. And so because it's so unusual, so therefore Rabbeinu Tam said we shouldn't start making pressure campaigns. So Erzarua says, what are you saying it's unusual? Unusual to walk around with a talis gadol. Yeah, that's unusual. But in shul, during davening, not unusual. And to have, he doesn't use the word talis katan, but it's the meaning. To have something under your shirt, by definition, that means some sort of talis katan. That's not unusual. And so therefore, he says, I don't understand. Now it's usual, so we should make a prayer. We should say, if you wear a talis katan, and if you daven in shul with a talis, then you're going to be buried with your tzitzis. And if not. And this is what he wants to do. But the discussion continues about what happens with people who passed away, whether it's with the tzitzis or without the tzitzis. There's many different sources that address it, and it's not our topic for today. If you're curious, in terms of what the Chevra Kadisha here does, as far as I understand, is that the person is buried in a talis, and the tzitzis are there, but they passel the tzitzis. That's only for someone who actually wore a talis gadol b'chayav. If someone never wore a talis gadol b'chayav, then they don't do that, but they put a talis katan and they do the same thing. They passel the tzitzis. But that's not our topic today. What happens with the dead? What do you see from this particular text? We see from this particular text, this is one of the earliest ones that talk about the concept of a talis katan. The idea of, we don't have a talis gadol anymore, and yeah, I wear it during davening, just for a few minutes each day, but what about for the rest of the day? How am I doing this mitzvah for the rest of the day? Am I doing this mitzvah the rest of the day? And we see that the Rabbi Yitzchak Or Zarua is saying that it's not unusual. He doesn't say everyone does it, but he says it's not unusual. Rabbeinu Tam seems to not talk about that. He seems to either ignore it, or maybe the reality was different for Rabbeinu Tam. That I don't know. But Rabbi Yitzchak Or Zarua says that it's beferish, not unusual for number one, people in shul to have a talis, and number two, for people to have a talis katan. And then you start having the svarim that have halacha yoimi, the halacha that we need to observe on a daily basis, telling us that this is indeed what we need to do. While not an absolute chiyuv, and it never rises to the level of an absolute chiyuv, there is strong encouraging words in the svarim of the Paiskim that one should go and find a way that he should always have tzitzis on him. And the Torah, as we'll see, uses that language and says that a person should have a talis katan. Let's read what the Torah said inside. The Torah is writing in the 14th century in Spain. He writes as follows. Though a person isn't obligated to buy a garment of 4 corners in order to become liable to do tzitzis, to be chayiv in tzitzis, only if you want to have that garment that has 4 corners, then you need to do tzitzis. It is good and properly. It's called Adam Zoyer V'Zoris B'Mitzvah Tzitzis. How? Sheyiloi beged katan. Have that beged katan, mitzuyot with tzitzis. Sheyilbash oisei kol hayoim. Why? Because ikar mitzvah is al schiras mitzvahs. The whole purpose of tzitzis, it's not a choik, right? It's edus. It has a certain function that's observable, that's intuitive. What is it? The pasuk says clearly that you should remember as chartav is called mitzvahs Hashem. You're not going to do. In those days, in the Zman HaTanoim, how are you mekam as chartav is called mitzvahs Hashem? Very simple. You wore your talis all day. You put tzitzis on it. You had a chartav is called mitzvahs Hashem. If you're going to do what we're doing today, and that is that some or all or most of people in shul during davening are doing it very nice, but you don't have a reason why it's chartav is called mitzvahs Hashem. You have the milah that during Krishma, when you're talking about tzitzis, you have a tal. Very nice. That's taka important. And that's why during Shema, we're noyik to have the best type of talis. That's yoitzel l'chol adeis with mamish atifa and wrapping around and atifas yishmaelim and the head and the left side and everything. Because for Shema, we want to have it the best possible way. So good, that's fine. But if you want to have a re'isa moisa, it's called mitzvahs Hashem. You need to have a talis katan, and this is how that this is how the minig develops. And there is no mention of a talis katan in Shas because it wasn't necessary. This is an area where the halacha had to develop based on the changing realities of the day. Fine.
Wasn't necessary time of Shas because everyone wore
Talis gadol, yeah. This was a daily garment, like you see over here. It's just a garment that people would wear. So it was very easy to just tie 4 corners onto it. Yeah. So now we come to the following. What are we going to do about a brachah? This is all leading up to the issue of the accusation about the missing line. What are we going to do about a brachah? The Gemara says in brachas, what brachah do you make on a talis? You make the bracha, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kinshanu b'v'seisav v'tzivanu, li'satei petzitzis. That's the bracha that we make. Okay. Could we make that bracha if we're putting on a talis katan? That's going to be the question. What's it going to depend on? Well, what does the verb li'satef mean? Is the verb li'satef applicable to a talis katan or not? So let's see. This was a big machlokes in the period of the Rishonim. In other words, the first few generations, when they're wearing a talis katan, everyone's talking about this. What's going to be the din with the bracha? Are you allowed to make it or not? Let's read the summary of the machlokes in the Shulchan Aruch. Zok the mechaber in Shulchan Aruch Erechaim Simin Ches. Al talis katan yochel levarich li'satef. No problem. You're wearing a talis katan. You befedish make the same bracha that you have in the Shas. And remember, some people hold that they don't like inventing new brachas. We like to stick with the nusach bracha we had in the Shas. You could use it. Why? Because the way you understand the verb of ituf, lehis atef, it could refer to a talis katan, that also works. Even though you're not doing atifa the way with all the bells and whistles, having it over your head and swinging it all over on your left side and all that you're not doing, but still, this is what the Mechaber says and this is how we paskin. Zok the Ramah, I disagree. And the Ramah follows another school of the Rishonim. And they said, we invented a new bracha. And we say, al mitzvah tzitzis. Why? Because you can't say li'is atef on a talis katan. Why? Because it's not ituf. The verb doesn't apply. V'chein noyagin, sagt der Rama, v'ein l'shanoi, so you got to stick with this. This is the custom, the way we need to follow. Okay, fine. Now, the Gra wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Commentary. He wrote very brief ha'aris, very brief, and they're cryptic sometimes. It's not always entirely clear what he intends, because he didn't write it as a pirush that's going to be for Klal Yisrael. Pashas, he wrote it just brief notes for himself. What does he write? What did the Gra write on this? So where is he commenting on? This is important. Where is he commenting on? He's commenting on the Ramah. So in other words, he wants to explain the Ramah who says, Al mitzvah tzitzis, yes, Liz'atef b'tzitzis, no. Zok the Gra, what is the reason? The reason that Ramah says you're not allowed to make Liz'atef is because there is no ituf. He sends you to an earlier source. We're not going to get involved with that reference. And here is the key. Here is the key. You'll see there that it uses the words she'atani me'il. And somehow, those words in the Darim Mem Tasamid Beis is going to support the Ramah. That you're allowed to say Leis Atef, but you're not allowed to say Al Mitzvah Tzitzis. Then the Gra continues and says, so what does the first opinion hold? What does the Mechaber hold? The Mechaber holds and the first opinion holds the ink paid. It doesn't matter. Lis Atef works for both. Don't worry about it. Don't become so narrow and say Lis Atef could only mean if you have a full fledged atifa. It could work for regular wearing of a garment as well. So here we have the Gra basically explaining what the machlekes is between these two opinions. The key word here is what happened in the Gemara in Nedarim. Somehow the Gemara in Nedarim is going to support the Ramah. So we need to read the Gemara in Nedarim. Zok the Gemara azoi. Nedarim daf mem tes amid beis. Devisu de Rabbi Yehuda nafkas. The wife of Rabbi Yehuda, the Amoyra Rabbi Yehuda, went out. Noktas Omra. The truth is, I don't remember which Rabbi Yehuda this is. There are so many. I don't remember which Rabbi Yehuda this is. Anyway, his wife goes out. Noktas Amra, she buys wool. Of the glima, she makes a cloak. Dehutfi. It's not clear what the word dehutfi means. There's different opinions. Kanofkas l'shuka, when she would go out to the marketplace to buy goods, michasya bey, she would wear this cloak. V'chad nofik Rabbi Yehuda litzluye, when Rabbi Yehuda would go to daven, have a michse umatzli, he would go and cover himself with this cloak and go daven. V'chad michsi bey, and when he would wear it, have a mavarech, he would make a brachah. He made up a brachah. New brachah. What's the brachah that he said? Baruch she'atani me'il. The pashtus, he said a full Baruch atah Hashem with Hashem. So one of the big discussions in this sugya is how is it not an issue of loy silbash? But pashtus, that's not loy silbash because lechatchila was made to be for both of them. The issue of loy silbash is when it's clothing designated for a woman. Here it's lechatchila lamoshal krats. Is there an issue for a man to, right? It's lechatchila created that is neutral, so then bepashtus there isn't a shayla. But anyway, see he's wearing this and he says this bracha baruch shatani me'il. Now we're not going to get into the discussion of what's his business of making up a new bracha and inventing a new bracha for this garment that he had. That doesn't need to concern us. What needs to concern us is what did the Gra have in mind when he quoted this to justify the Ramah. So I'll tell you the way, but Pashtus, the way the Tzemach Tzedek understood it.
The Ramah said only al mitzvah tzitzis?
The Ramah says, yeah, you only say al mitzvah tzitzis and we don't say le'zateh tzitzis. And this Gemara is supposed to support it. How does this Gemara support it? So the Tzemach Tzedek understands the Gra to be saying he did not use the word ituf here. He used a different word. Sounds very similar, but there's no fei. The word is sha'atani. That's not the same thing as the word ituf. Hold on a second. It's the word sha'atani. It's going to take a few minutes to develop this part. He said the word sha'atani and not ituf. That's not the same thing. Why? Why did he say sha'atani? Because there was no ituf. A cloak, whatever garment this was, didn't have all the specs of ituf, and this is a raya for the Ramah who says that you cannot say lis atef b'tzitzis on a talis katan, just like Rabbi Yehuda. When he made his bracha, he used the word sha'atani, and he didn't use the word atifa in his bracha. Why? Because it didn't have atifa, so too today, on the talis katan, it doesn't have atifa, you can't use it. This is the way that Tzemach Tzedek understood the Gra. Now, let's read what the Tzemach Tzedek had to say about this in the Piskei Dinim. And now we're coming to the controversial passage. What says the Tzemach Tzedek as follows. He's commenting on this sif in the Shulchan Aruch. And he says as follows. Ituf, about the concept of ituf, he says, B'Yeshaya Gimel Chav Beis, V'hama atvois. You have this word v'hama atvois in Yeshaya, Perek Gimel, Pasuk Chav Beis. And Radak over there says, Ksus, Shemiskasim, Umisatfim Boy. Okay, in our versions, the Radak's a little different. It's just Ksus, Shemisatvois Boy, but it doesn't matter. It's not going to change the point. What does the Tzemach Tzedek say on this? Ubevadai einay ma'atef, rakufoi v'loi roishoi. Definitely, we are dealing here with a case of someone who is not doing the full ituf. They're just wearing it on their body. A full ituf includes the head, where the head has to be wrapped, which is how we do it in the morning. What's the raya from here? The raya from here, I think, is because, although the pasuk uses the word v'hama atvois, the Radak explains it for a ksus. I think that Tzemach Tzedek is saying that a ksus is just a regular garment. A regular garment. You don't do ituf with a regular garment. What are we starting to see here? That Radak is going to build a narrative. The Tzemach Tzedek is going to build here a narrative. That the narrative goes that ituf does not have to be where you have this side over that side, over your heads, hanging over your eyes, with everything on the left. Ituf doesn't have to mean that. The Tzemach Tzedek here is going to bring raya after raya after raya, that if you cover something with something, we're very happy using the term ituf for that. And so his first raya here is that we're talking about a ksus, because Radak says it's a ksus, and he uses ksus for what? For a pasuk of Hama Atvois, which is talking about ituf. Where is all this going to go? It's going to go against the Gra. How's it going to go against the Gra? Because the Gra is telling us that, well, hold on a second. Hold on. We'll summarize that soon. So that's raya number one. Continues. Umatzinu, we also find Ba'atoif Libi. Pasuk in Tehillim says Ba'atoif Libi. Now, that's ituf on just the heart. Okay, now obviously it's an expression, but still expressions mean something. It's not the whole body having ituf, it's just one part of the body having ituf. Another pasuk in Iyuv, Perek Chav Gimel, Yatef Yamin V'lo Yere. Here it's talking about an ituf only on the right side. So it's not a full ituf on the whole body. What do you see from here? That if you do this covering on even one part of the body, even just the right side of the body, it's called ituf. And so therefore, what is this? This is defending which view? The Mechaber's view. Mechaber said, if you're wearing a little talis katan, it's barely covering you a little in the front and a little in the back. It's not most of your body, and it's definitely not your head, and it's definitely not covering your face. Is it okay to make lisatip tzitzis? Yeah. Why? Tzemach Tzedek is bringing all these rayas because the word ituf is workable when you're any coverage works for ituf. Okay, but now let's remember we had a gra, and what did the gra do? The gra said what each opinion. Something to back up each opinion. He said, this one holds like this one holds. What was the raya that the Gra brought for the Rama? The Gra brought, the Gra brought from Nidarim Shaltani Me'il, and as I explained before, what did the Gra mean by that? The way that at least the Tzemach Tzedek's understanding it is that here we see that because it wasn't ituf, we couldn't use the word atifa. Okay, but you already see that the Tzemach Tzedek's going in a different direction. The Tzemach Tzedek is going in a direction that allows you to use the word atifa for anything. So obviously, Tzemach Tzedek is going to want to say that this is not a raya. And what does he do? He says the words, the two words out of the magic words for tonight's presentation. What does he say? Ve'enei tshuva. Ve'enei tshuva. What's ve'enei tshuva mean? It's not a raya. Ve'enei tshuva means it's not a raya. This is a term that the Rishonim already used. You see, already the Rishonim, when they would argue with each other, they would use this terminology, and they would write the Einay Tshuva. And the Tzemach Tzedek writes us about the Gra, that his raya from the Dorim is Einay Tshuva, is Nishkein raya. Why? You have the pasuk saying Yate. Notice that's not ituf. There's no fei in that word. Here it's talking about the Metzora. And it says that the Metzora has to be have a face covering all the way up to his upper lip. That's what Safam Yate is. But the word that the pasuk uses is not ituf. It uses the word Yate, which is the same word of Baruch She'atani Me'il. Pirshu b'Gemara Reish Perek Gimel Domayed Katan ituf harosh. V'cheinu b'Targum Onkelos Yis Atov. What is he showing here? There's no difference between the word Yate, Oite, and ituf. Atifa and oite is the same word. It means the same thing. And that's why here you can have a pasuk that says Yate, and the meaning could mean ituf, or Onkelos could say they're interchangeable. V'hu oite me'il, we'll bring another example. In Shmuel, Aleph, Simen, Chav, Ches, Yud, Daled, it says oite, What does Metzudas Tzion say? Me'utaf. So what do you see? There's no difference between these two terms. V'chsiv kebeged yata. You have a pasuk that says a yata on a beged. What do we see from all this? In Cain, here's the summary of the Tzemach Tzedek. A beged shayach loshen oita. A regular garment, you say oita. And guess what? What's oita? The same as atifa. And shapirusha ituf. Lachein sagt the Tzemach Tzedek. Gam alavish as talis katan. Even for a talis katan, yesh loimer lisate petzitzis. You should say lisate petzitzis. Why is that better? Because you could say it. Okay, you could doesn't mean you should. No, you should. Why? Kivin shechein nusach habracha. Because that's what Chazal said. Chazal told us one bracha for a talis. Lisate petzitzis. Yes, due to historical circumstances, we stopped wearing that whole elaborate thing. Can we get away with still saying lisate and not being fools? Not being inaccurate? Answers the Tzemach Tzedek, yes. Yes. Why? This is a full defense of the Mechaber, of the first Shitta. Lisate could work. And what is the Tzemach Tzedek along his way? What is he doing? He says that a regular beged you could call oita, and oita is the same thing as atifa, and so therefore no problem. The Gemara in the Darim, Baruch Sha'atani Me'il, you're going to tell me, oh, he didn't say atifa there, he only said Sha'atani because it wasn't a talis? What are you saying? Sha'atani and atifa is the exact same thing, so therefore he says about the gra, ve'ena tshuva. Now it's important to recognize here that the Gra didn't come say one side or the other. The Gra was just saying, here is a svara to defend this side. And he brought the raya from the Darim for the Ramah. And here is a svara for the Mechaber, that it doesn't make a difference. So, la halacha, the Gra didn't settle on one side over the other side. But the Tzemach Tzedek, along the way, does seem to indicate very strongly a preference for the Mechaber. And along the way, the raya that the Gra brought for the Shitta of the Ramah, he says it's not a raya, ve'ena tshuva.
Why in the Darim didn't use a different nusach?
What was that?
How come in the Darim he used a different nusach completely?
Why did he say Baruch Sha'atani Me'il and not Lashon of Atifa?
Why did he say the bracha that Chazal said?
Oh. So I don't know. Firstly, I don't think this is not the tzitzis. This is not a tzitzis bracha. Let's just clarify. Assume that this beged didn't have four corners. He made up a bracha. He was thankful for Hashem that he had a garment. He made a bracha. Al derech someone makes a shechiyanu when they have a beged out of simcha. That's the discussion. This Gemara comes up in the context of a new beged. You make a shechiyanu. So this was his shechiyanu. I don't want to get into a discussion of he should have just made a shechiyanu. Why did he make a new unique bracha? But this is not a tzitzis bracha. I don't think that the way my understanding is the way the poskim speak about it. They seem to otherwise it would have implications. But we can't get into that now. Whether he did or he didn't, it doesn't affect the thing. There are many times the Gemara brings brachas, and it takes out Hashem's name with an understanding. Look at the text. Look at text 8. Look at text 8, for example. Baruch Hashem Kishalom says of the Santa. Okay, so this is the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, is it unusual for the Tzemach Tzedek to disagree with the Gra in his Chuvas and Piskei Dinim? No, it's not unusual. The Tzemach Tzedek does it. He does it quite often. It's not such a big deal. But here is the problem. The problem is, so first of all, here is, I'm showing you on the screen now, the print of the Chuvas of the Piskei Dinim from 1949 in Berlin. This is the actual page. If you're able to see the words, you see it? You're able to see it. Okay. It says Rabbi Chutner to the Rebbe, I'm familiar with the earlier prints, and the earlier prints have a different language here. What's the earlier print? So here is the page from Vilna, 1884. This is after the Rebbe Marash already passed away. It's long after the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. It's even after the Rebbe Marash passed away. And this is the first printing of the Piskei Dinim. And look at the words here. V'agra hevim in adoran daf matesha atani me'il v'anoichi ba'onyi loizachisi lahavin dvarav hakdoshim. And I, in my poverty, my poor understanding, I am not zoicha to understand the Gra's holy words, the Harei, and it continues. It does not alter the direction of the piece. It does not alter the context of the piece. But there is a different reading here. Instead of saying ve'enei tshuva, which is dismissive, what it says is, I'm not zoicha to understand dvarav hakdoshim. Okay, this is the first print. Generally, the rule is that the first print usually has more accuracy than later prints. That's generally a rule of thumb for how things work. But it's not only the first print. It was also the same. And here's another copy, just to show that it wasn't an accident. Here's another copy with the exact same thing. This is a different copy of the same printing. And the same thing happened when they printed it in Shanghai sometime, I don't have the exact year, sometime during World War II, by Lubavitch Chassidim. They printed it. It had that same language. And so, imagine Rav Hutner knows this, sees a new print that comes out in 1949, and the text was altered. Instead of the Tzemach Tzedek being highly reverential and respectful of the Grav, it turns into two words that are dismissive, Ein Tshuva. This sounds like censorship. This sounds like you're altering the text. This is no good. And so he asked the Rebbe for an explanation. Okay, so the Rebbe responded. The first thing you already saw the Rebbe responded was, the Rebbe said, Chassidim would never do such a drastic change, such a fundamental change to the Rebbe's lighting. If anyone knows the relationship of a Chassid to his Rebbe, would know this is B'chlal not shy. But then he goes on, the Rebbe goes on in this letter to tell us what happened. And this is text 13 on your page, which I'll summarize outside. The Rebbe says as follows. I heard from the Frierdiker Rebbe that when they went to print this for the first time in Vilna in 1884, someone in the department of printing, he was not sure if it's the higher-ups or if it's the actual laborers who were doing the typesetting. And so, where was this happening? It was happening in Vilna. Vilna is a Misnagdic city. In addition, you're dealing with a very unusual time because the Rebbe Marash had passed away and the Rebbe Rashab did not officially take over the Nesius till a number of years later. So Chassidim were a little more vulnerable, or maybe opponents of Chassidim felt a little more emboldened. And so they used this opportunity to introduce this ziyuf. And so therefore, be'emes it's supposed to say the way it's printed in 1949, ve'ein tshuva, what you saw, what you got mad about, that's the truth. The other stuff that you know is a corruption that was introduced by these Chevra in Vilna in 1884. The Rebbe continues to say that when the first copies came to Lubavitch, at a certain point this was noticed, and they tried every means they have to reprint the final pages in the proper nusach. However, here I'll read the quote from the letter. Umuvan asher loy hoisa biyadi levayer es kol hatoifsim im hanusach hamezuyaf. The Frierdiker Rebbe is speaking here. The Rebbe is saying the Frierdiker Rebbe's word. It wasn't in my hands to get rid of all of the problematic copies. The Frierdiker Rebbe was 4 years old in Tafresh Mem Daled. What does it mean over here? It wasn't in my, so Pashtos, and this is the truth, someone went to Rav Hutner's archive and found a letter. The Rebbe would often correct things before it was sent. The Rebbe had corrected, it reads, Loi hoisa biyadam. Those people, the Lubavitchers in 1884, they didn't have the ability to get rid of, once something is printed, it's out there, they didn't have the ability to get rid of all of the problematic copies. This is the story that the Frierdiker Rebbe told me, he says. The Rebbe goes on to say that if you know the Tzemach Tzedek Signin and how he usually wrote, and how he deals with the poskim, you would know that this is not shayach that he would write this type of line. The Tzemach Tzedek wouldn't write this type of line, at least not about the Gra. In fact, in number 14, I brought a few instances in where the Tzemach Tzedek disagrees with the Gra, and there's nothing close to this type of very, very highly reverential relationship. In the first one, he says, Ein dvarav nirim klal. In the second one, he says, Ve'ein tam l'svara zu. In the third one, also a pretty dismissive type of language. And likewise in the last one as well. I can't say these are all the examples, but these are some. So the Rebbe points to this, and this is the way the Rebbe sends his letter to Rabbi Hutner. What was Rabbi Hutner's reaction? I don't know. We don't know what Rabbi Hutner's reaction to this is. However, you would think the story would end here. The story doesn't end here. Why? Because, let me introduce you to this character here. Professor Shmuel Glick. Professor Shmuel Glick is a big scholar, and his specialty is in Shuvas. In Eretz Yisrael. He's involved in the Shakin Institute and the Schechter Institute, and these. And he wrote a svarim. One of his svarim he wrote is Kuntras HaTshuvas HaChadash, and he writes about censorship in svarim. And he writes over there that there's Piskei Dinim of Tzemach Tzedek. it used to say, "Va'anochi ba'ani Eloi zachisi lahavin v'arav hakdoshim." And in 1949, when Lubavitch reprinted it for the third time, they changed it to Ve'ena Tshuva. And yes, they have this story that it originally was that way, and in Vilna there's but there's zero evidence of that, he wrote. And so he's of the opinion that the whole narrative is just one big Baba Maisa, and this is just a story of censorship. And this he printed these svarim. So this is around 2007 that he publishes his book. This kicked off about a year of controversy in different magazines and journals where people started going at each other, and it got a little nasty, And so...
Did he know the Rebbe's answer to it?
Yeah, sure. He was familiar with the letter of the Rebbe. He said, I know this letter, but show me the evidence. I don't believe it. Why? Because... First print, right? Second print. So all of a sudden I have the third print. Where is the evidence to suggest that? And moreover, there is no record, he said, of anyone crying foul in the 1880s, no one crying foul in the 1890s, no one in the 20th century, up until 1940. The first time we heard of a problem was in 1949. Really? If there was a real issue here, shouldn't we have heard from someone before? In fact, him and others who got involved in this, there's a letter from the Rebbe to Avram Chaim 2 years later about this very issue, where clearly it was apparent that Avram Chaim also had no clue. And Avram Chaim is the Radatz's son. So if the Radatz's son, David Tzvi Chaim's son, Peretz Chaim, Peretz Chernigovir's son, didn't know about this, never heard about this, as evidenced by the fact that the Rebbe had to inform him about this. So show me the evidence. Well, what this did was the conversation was a very good thing in the sense that all the people started going to different libraries to start searching and finding for different things. So here, I'm going to show you what the different things that were found, and a lot of it is available because people realize they can make money off this by selling it at auction. So a lot of stuff auction houses have put up online. So exhibit number 1 is the following. Here you have the original print from 1884 in the exact way that has those words, and it has that way. However, here there's a handwritten comment. There's a handwritten comment that takes out those words and writes To'os Sofer, and writes, it's supposed to say Ve'ena Tshuva, writes on the side. Whose handwriting is this? So the people who are selling this, they say that this is Reb Shmuel HaSofer's handwriting. Now, I don't have enough of expertise to be able to tell or not. I did compare Reb Shmuel HaSofer's handwriting to those two words, and it does match up amazingly well. And the theory basically is, their statement is, here is a copy that Reb Shmuel HaSofer was in Lubavitch in time to the Rebbe Rashab and in time to the Rebbe Marash. And he was the official transcriber. And here we see, long before 1949, that he never came out of Russia, right? So here's long before 1949, you want to estimate when this happened. Is it the 1860s, is it the 1870s, is it the 1880s? Exactly when, we're not going to know. But he went and said there's a problem. So all of a sudden, the idea that the narrative begins in 1949 is now that theory has been weakened. Number 1. Number 2, you all know the idea and the fact that there's an entire archive in Russia. The Rebbe Sfarim, the Rebbe Rashab took his Sfarim when they went to Rostov, put it in storage. The communists took it, and Ad Hayom, they're in the Lenin Library, or part of it is in the Jewish Museum, or whatever it is. It has never been returned to Chabad. However, what Russia did do a number of years ago is they took many of these Sfarim and they put it up online for viewing. So I went to look at the Piskei Dinim, the way it appears in the Shneerson collection, in these Sfarim. This is the Rebbe Rashab Sfarim. Here too, there is a correction. And by definition, this correction was implemented before 1917, because that was the last time the Chabad people saw the Sefer. Here as well, the line is crossed out and it says Ve'ena Tshuva. I don't know whose handwriting this is. I didn't look in to see it, but here again, we're starting to build a case because we see that this is not a story that begins in 1949. This is a story that has roots earlier. Okay, that's still a far cry from proving the entire narrative the way the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe said it. Hold on, almost none of this he had when he originally wrote. Access to none of this. Most of this came out after. But we'll come back to that soon. The next year, in 2008, on Erech, here is there's a Haredi historian in Eretz Yisrael. His name is Reb David Kamenetsky, and he gets involved in these types of things. And he got his hands on an edition of the Piskei Dinim from 1884, and it has the page. And it has the Tshuva, and it has the Tshuva. Now, the way he describes it is that this page is added on. The old page was ripped out, and this page was added in. Now, he doesn't know, and he wrote about this. He didn't know exactly when this happened, so he speculated a rather bizarre theory. His theory was that sometime in America in the 1940s, a new page was printed. The old page was taken out. And around the time that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote his letter is when this page was added in. Now, obviously, these are the types of things that could be checked and determined, but it does sound, on the face of it, is a very bit of a weird thing. But it's interesting. It's one piece we have, but let's continue. In recent years, the Svarim of Rabbi Yaakov Landau, the Chassid of the Rebbe Rashab, who went to Eretz Yisrael and was the Rav in Bnei Brak for many years, his Svarim and library went up for auction. And in his library, here's his edition of the Piskei Dinim of that print. And here we have another example of the Ein Tshuva without the problematic line. All of this, yeah, look at the title page. Nas Tafresh Handal, 1884. Here is another example. Here is a copy that's being sold by another auction house that has both pages. The first page is the one that says the Ein Tshuva, and later on in the volume, you have the other page, both in the exact same volume. So that's another example. And here is another example, a different one, a different copy, also printed in 1884, and also with the words, the Ein Tshuva. So what do you have here? All of a sudden, not only have we established that you have it from before 1949, we also established that there was a printing that happened, and it does look like right at the time that the other page was printed, this was printed. That is the most reasonable theory, that both were printed at the same time. Okay, so now you have to back down a little. The people who made the accusations have to back down, but they're not done yet. Why? Because they could say, no problem. You proved to me the story began before 49? Yes. You've proved people raised the problem before 1949. You proved that around the time that the original printing happened, there were two versions that were printed? Yeah. But who says which one is the real one? Which one reflects what the Tzemach Tzedek wrote? Maybe the one that says V'anochi be'ani lo zachisi lahavin is divrei kacha or whatever it is, that's the original one. And then someone in Lubavitch didn't like it, so they ran to Vilna to print another page that said Ve'ein Tshuva. Like, how do you know which one is the authentic one or not? So what do you do in this case? So in this case, you have to start moving to manuscripts. We have manuscripts. Before these Svarim were printed, how did Chassidim learn from the Piskei Dinim? They would copy them down into their bichlach. Chassidim would have bichlach, where they would see what the other person had, they would copy it and write it down, and then they would go around with this. Till 1884, if you wanted to learn the Piskei Dinim of the Tzemach Tzedek, you needed to have it in a bichlach. In the library over here, in the library of Agudah Chassidut Chabad, there are two separate bichlach, that have this Piskei Dinim, this part of the Piskei Dinim that's written down in the bichel. And in recent months, they put it all up online. So you could go through it and you could find it. Here's one bichel. This is number 228. Here's the opening. It's like the title page of this bichel. And here is the relevant page of the bichel. This is not the Tzemach Tzedek's handwriting. This is a chassid's handwriting. And here is the relevant piece. You can see right in the middle where it says Sha'atani Me'il Ve'ein Tshuva. Yeah, you see it? Okay, very good. So here's a bichel. This is not printed. That's one. Number two, here's another bichel. This one actually has a title page and gives us a date of 1862. So though you can't be sure that things weren't added later, it's possible that pages were added later after 1862, but it gives you a ballpark estimate of when this thing was written, long before 1884. It's a bichel. Here is the relevant page. And if you look at the page, on the third line you see, also it says Ve'ein Tshuva. It does not say V'anochi ba'ani lo zachisi lahavin as dvarav hakdoshim. So what does that mean? Now you have the handwritten materials that weren't part of this whole printing process, that no evidence of crossing out or anything of the sort, that also had the words Ve'ein Tshuva. So now, if someone wants to come along and say that the original was V'anochi ba'ani, so now it already starts bordering on conspiracy theory. Or really, the way I'd say it is, now the evidence, you have to prove your case. Okay, you have to prove it. So these Chavra said, and by the way, what's his name? Reb David Kamenetsky also kind of joined that side of the very skeptical people. It's not true. Maybe you can't bring a raya. Maybe already the Chassidim were changing things. Okay, but this is already where it's becoming a little ridiculous.
The printings in Vilna were done by Lubavitchers?
Chassidim were tasked with overseeing the printing, but the actual printing house and press was run by not Lubavitchers.
I'm saying Lubavitchers is other Chabad.
Lubavitch. This was printed by Lubavitch, not by other. We know who was in charge of the print. Who were the shluchim to print this? We know who they were. They were Lubavitch Chassidim, not from other streams of Chabad Chassidus. Okay. So what's the next step? Well, if only we could have the Ksav Yad of the Tzemach Tzedek once and for all. Okay. The Rebbe wrote in his letter to Avram Chaim that we don't have the Ksav Yad of the Tzemach Tzedek. He does write, by the way, Tachas Yadeinu Bichol Ksav Yad. We have one Bichol that says it this way, and which is very strong evidence, right? But he writes, it's a maitik. Guf Ksav Yad Kodesh is Nishar Me'eva Layan. It's in Europe. It didn't. We don't have it now. This didn't stay in Russia. The Tzemach Tzedek managed to take out most of the Ksavim, and definitely the Chuvas of the Tzemach Tzedek and the Piskanim he took out. What happened was, during World War II, when the Frierdiker Rebbe ran away and when the Frierdiker Rebbe escaped from Poland and came to the United States of America, he came with many Ksavim. Many Ksavim stayed behind in the American embassy, and they were looted, they were taken. Some of them ended up in a library after World War II, and in Tavshan Lamed Ches, came back to Lubavitch. So that was part of the collection, but part of it still didn't come back. And there was a list of what needs to be there. And in the list, things were missing. And no one knew where this stuff was until the late 90s. After Gimel Tammuz, the late 90s, there was a tip that came in that there's another archive in Russia, not part of the Lenin library that was taken with the communist takeover holding, a separate institution. The military has an archive, and basically things that they got during the war, that they found during the war, and they brought back to Russia, included a whole archive of this other half of this material. The first half was brought back in Lamed Ches, and this was discovered in the late 90s. And it's still there ad hayoim. But what did happen is that people went and made copies of all the material that is there, including all of the Chuvas of the Tzemach Tzedek. Now they're able to look at it. The new editions of the Chuvas of the Tzemach Tzedek have been matched against the Tzemach Tzedek's own handwriting. And the Piskei Dinim, we also have the Tzemach Tzedek's own handwriting. So they released the page of what it looks like. Here is the title page of this. All the copies are in black and white. Here is the Tzemach Tzedek actual handwriting of the Piskei Dinim. If you look about 6 lines down, you'll see clearly the word Sha'atani Me'il, then it says Ve'ena Tshuva. So now, it's pretty much a closed case, right? This is what it says in the Tzemach Tzedek's Tshuva. So forget it, the conversation should be over. This is what it originally said. The story that the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe is absolutely what happened. That it was changed by Matzvis Mevilna, because we saw the evidence that in 1884 there was another print. So obviously there was someone who didn't like what the Tzemach Tzedek wrote and changed it. I need to call your attention to the fact that if you go to that page, if you go to the original page that we're talking about here, if you look here, you'll see that on this page, there's a reference here to the Alter Rebbe. And it's a different topic. And the lashon that he says is, over there, V'agam ki mi ani lo oirer al dvarav hakdoshim, makom makom toirehi v'lumad ani tzarech, and so therefore I'm going to disagree. So he's disagreeing with his grandfather. Stands to reason that they looked at that. They saw on the left-hand side the referential, the reverence with which the Tzemach Tzedek is writing about the Alter Rebbe, and they saw those words, Dvarav HaKdoshim, and they decided that they're going to add it in that for the Gra as well. Not so much that the Tzemach Tzedek needed to say it about the Gra, but on the same page, and when he disagrees with the Alter Rebbe, that you have the Dvarav HaKdoshim, so then there, and only there, because they didn't change it anywhere else. There, the mamish b'smichas makim, then the gra needs the covet that he should be treated in a similar way. That's the way I understand what happened here. Now, were these professors convinced? The answer is no. They continued going on to say that they don't know, they don't trust the ksav, it needs to be checked by experts, maybe it was forged. It was pointed out to them that in this area, of Ve'ena Tshuva, you cannot fit those 7 words. V'anoichi ba'ani, it could have never said it. So then he wrote in one of his articles, well, maybe it once said b'mechilas k'voi tayrasai, and the theories that started coming out were just so ridiculous. It was just a lesson in the idea that sometimes you get married to a certain idea, then it's very hard to you throw good money after bad money. This is a classic case of an academic throwing good academic money after bad money, rather than putting it in a different place. The irony of it all is, what do we follow? We don't follow the Tzemach Tzedek. Because what did the Tzemach Tzedek say? The Tzemach Tzedek said you can make the brachah lis'atef b'tzitzis on a talis katan because it's atifa. And guess what? Hayom Yom Yudalet Sivan says? Hayom Yudalet Sivan says we're not doing that. If you're making a brachah on a talis katan, you make our mitzvah since the way that Ramah said it. So the irony in this whole thing is we don't even follow this Tzemach Tzedek. Okay, it's a separate discussion. Why? It's not for us to discuss, to figure out now. Now, if I can, I know I'm running a little over time, but 2 more minutes. I want to give you a little bit of another thing that's happening over here that it's important for you to be aware of. That I think is playing a role in a little bit of these polemics. Everyone knows about the fighting that Chassidim had with the Misnagdim. And everyone also in the frum world today and for many years wants that there should be peace. Chassidim want there should be peace, and the Misnagdim also want that there should be peace. The question is, what are the terms? Every peace agreement has terms. What are the terms of this peace agreement? What is it going to look like? Or another way of asking the question is, if it is okay to have Chassidim and Misnagdim, so then why did our ancestors wage such an intense war against them? That's a very normal question to ask, and you need to have an answer. If you're in a community, you need to have an answer for that. Well, there's 2 possible ways of addressing this. One is the way the Rebbeim address this, the way the Alter Rebbe addresses this, and then there's an alternative way. If you look at the letters of the Alter Rebbe, and we once got into it here, I don't know, a while back, you see the approach is very simple. The Gra, I have no talis on the Gra. The Gra is a chassid, the Gra is a big goyin. These are the words Alter Rebbe used. Chas v'shalom. Anyone should say anything negative about the Gra. Why? He was misled. It's not his fault, he was misled. There were mecharcher ediv, terrible people, horrible people who wanted to fight, and they misled the Gra. And yeah, if you hear the things you had heard, you would do the exact same things that he would do. And so therefore, we dan him l'kafschus, he's holy, he's good, everything is fine. The other people were problematic people, and now that the evidence became clear that it was all a lie, so we could be at peace with each other, right? That is one way of understanding what the peace terms should look like. And more or less, I think, at least from my perspective, that everyone, Chassidim could live with that. I think not Chassidim could also live with that. I think it works. That's one model. However, there are some people not happy with this model. They want a different model. And interestingly, you hear sometimes even Chassidim have bought into this narrative. The other narrative goes like this. Chassidim was a very, very dangerous sect of Jews. Very dangerous. And on their own, they would have gone way off. They wouldn't have kept halacha, and they would have all these terrible beliefs and whatever. Thank God for the Gra and the Misnagdim. Because the Gra and the Misnagdim served as a good stop force, as a good pushback that pushed Chassidim into a good and healthy place, which therefore they became a good force in Am Yisrael the way they are today. So Baruch Hashem, thank God for the Gra and the Misnagdim and the Isnagdus. Okay. There's already evidence of Chassidim using this language in the times of Chassidim, of Misnagdim uses this language in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek. There's even, I can't go into details now, there's even an attempt to put this in the mouth of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's. To have the Tzemach Tzedek have said this. There's no evidence that he did, but there's an attempt to make the Tzemach Tzedek say this. I think that the argument over this one line plays a role in this. Because for those people who ad hayoim want that the second narrative should be the narrative, and that they want that the peace terms should be in the second way, for them it's very important to show that the Rebbeim were extremely, extremely reverential and even thankful and grateful to the Misnagdim. And this line from the Tzemach Tzedek would be perfect because it would fit so well. If he said, that would fit into this narrative of the Gra being one of the people who saved the Chassidim from going off course. Whereas, if it's just another Gadol B'Yisrael, a Goyim by all accounts, where you say, Ve'ena Tshuva, you lose that. You don't have that opportunity. But Poyol, that second narrative is not accurate. If you look at the letters of Alter Rebbe, you'll see that he asks you as a reader today not to buy that narrative, because many people have. He asks you to buy the narrative to understand something else, that there was people who had ill will in mind, and they knew they were lying, they spread lies for the simple reason because human beings sometimes do that, and they got righteous people on their side by misleading them. That's what the Alter Rebbe wants you to go. And that's a very, very different way of thinking about it. So this is not the only line that there's arguments of. There are many other things where there are disputes that come up in these types of situations that seem to be revolving around this, and I think this is another piece. The bottom line is that tzitzis, we're going to wear our talis katan, we're going to wear our talis gadol, we're going to appreciate what atifa is, we're going to make the brachah, and we're going to have more kavanah with the words than we mean. And when you say the words lis atef betzitzis, wir sein Gor an andere lis atef.